Hello, this video is for IXL.A1.A.4. It's titled Convert Between Decimals and Fractions. The 3-character code for this activity is Whiskey Sierra Delta. So in this activity, just the title says, we're going to be converting back and forth between decimals to fractions. We're also going to be seeing some mixed numbers show up. Mixed number is a whole number with a fraction. We're also going to see positive and negative numbers as well. So let's go ahead and get started on it. So our first question tells us to write 1 over 20 as a decimal number. So 1 over 20 indeed is a fraction. It's important to remember that all fractions are division problems. So technically, if we read this as 1 divided by 20, if we did 1 divided by 20, then we would get some answer, and that answer indeed would be a decimal number. So let's go ahead and do that with a calculator, and we'll look at how to do it with a calculator, and then we'll also look at how to do this by hand as well. So if I do 1 and I divide that by 20, because remember every fraction is a division problem, so I do 1 divided by 20, it's going to give me an answer of 0.05. So over here, I'll go ahead and put 0.05. This would be my answer here, and indeed that would be the final answer for this first question. Now, it's important to also know how to do this by hand. So if we did 1 divided by 20, well, you could do that with the idea of doing the 1 being divided by 20. And then we'd have to put our decimal here, decimal there. 1 won't go into 10, so this would be 0. And then we put another 0 here. 20 will go into 100 5 times. 5 times 20 is 100, and then we subtract and we get 0, and we see that our answer would still be 0.05. Another way of doing this is to go ahead and get this to a fraction that is equivalent to 1 over 20, in which the denominator here had some number of zeros, a 1 with a certain number of zeros. So in this case, if we start putting zeros here, can we multiply something 20 times something to get 10? No, we can't. So let's put another 0 here. 20 times some number equals 100. Right? Indeed, that number is 5, so 20 times 5 is 100. So let's multiply the numerator by 5 as well, and we would get 5 over 100. Well, now that we have this as a denominator, in a fraction in which our denominator has a certain number of zeros in it, we could then write this as a decimal. So we know it's a proper fraction. The numerator is less than the denominator. So we know that this is a value less than 1, so we're going to have 0 in the ones place, point, and then 5 100ths. Well, we know that the second place value for decimals is indeed the 100ths place. And how many of them do we have? We have 5 of them, and we need a place holding 0 here. So we would still end up with that answer of 0.05. So you can do it with a calculator by dividing the numerator by the denominator, getting the decimal. We could also do the long division, 1 divided by 20 like we saw, or the easiest way to do it by hand if you're not going to use a calculator is to find an equivalent fraction in which you have some multiple of 10 as the denominator. That is to say you have a 1 with a certain number of zeros. That would be multiples of 10, right? So let's go ahead and look at the next question. It asks us to write 0.5 as a fraction. So let's consider 0.5. 0.5. Well, we know the first place value here is the tenths place, right? So in this case, we know that this is equal to 5 over 10, or 5/10, correct? And indeed, it is a fraction. Now, we could simplify this, right? 5 and 10 are both divisible by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1, and 10 divided by 5 is 2. So we would end up with a fraction of 1/2. Now, many of you might have said, well, I know that 0.5 is equal to 1/2, because some of the popular ones that we have, 0.25 is 25 100ths, and that is equal to 1/4, because they both divide by 25, right? So 0.25 is 1/4, and then this one that we did here, 0.5, we know that, like we said, that's 5/10, and that is equal to 1/2. And then we have 0.75, and this would be 75 100ths. So we'll put that there, 75 over 100. And then 75 and 100 are both divisible by 25, and that would simplify down to 3 over 4, right? So 0.25 is equal to 1/4, 0.5 is 1/2, and 0.75 is 3/4. So, and also notice that 1/2 is equal to 2/4. So we're kind of dealing with quarters here. So the ones that are quarters are kind of easily spotted. So as we go through, we kind of show the work there for 0.25, 0.5, and 0.75. As we see those appear, we'll just automatically realize what those answers are for those. And also, if you're looking at using a calculator for that, let's go ahead and get my calculator back here. If we put in 0.5 into our calculator here, and then we go to the math button and click on this math button here, notice that the first thing says fraction. So we'll go ahead, it's already at 1, so we'll just hit enter. And it's saying take 0.5, make it a fraction. So we'll hit enter, and you see there it equals 1/2. So you can also use a calculator to convert decimals over to fractions. So let's look at our next question here. Write 9.75 as a mixed number. So the decimal, whenever we read this, we would read this 9 and 75 100ths. The decimal here is the word and, A-N-D. 9 and 75 100ths, and because the 5 is in the 100ths place, right? So if we wrote this as a fraction, we would have 9, and that means we're going to add to that 75 100ths. That would be 9 and 75 100ths. Well, if we put those together, we could just say that's 9 75 100ths. We now have a mixed number, right? Which is what we have to get to, so we're good to go there. However, this will simplify, right? Remember that, we look at this last screen, 75 100ths will simplify to 3/4. So let's go ahead and write this as 9 and 3/4. And this would be the final answer that we would put in. Now, I believe that for this activity, that the fractions do not have to be simplified. You could put in 9 and 75 100ths in as the answer, and it would count it correct. But it will also take it if you simplify it. So it's a good habit to get into, to simplify your fractions whenever possible. So I strongly encourage you to go ahead and do that. Plus, it helps you practice up on simplifying fractions, correct? All right, next question. Write -9 and 1/2 as a decimal number. So we're going to need some decimal number, right? Well, what's in the ones place? Well, we see everything, the decimal will be right here, right? 9 and, remember the decimal is the word and. So to the left of the decimal is -9. So we'll go ahead and put that's -9 in there. And then 1/2 is a decimal. Well, we've seen that before in the very first problem, I think it was, where we had to convert 0.5 to a fraction, well, and we got 1/2. So if we convert 1/2 to a decimal, 0.5, then we're going to end up with that 0.5 there. So our final answer would be 9.5. On our next question here, write -5 and 35 100ths as a mixed number. So that's -5, and then the decimal, because remember the decimal's here. Oh, we're doing a mixed number. We don't actually have to write the decimal. A mixed number is a whole number or an integer along with a fraction. So what would that fraction be? Well, 35 over, and then the 5 is in the 100ths place. So we want to go ahead and just put 100 as our denominator. That's 5 and 35 100ths. Now, 35 100ths will simplify. So let's go ahead and look at how we could do that with the calculator. So we have our calculator here, and we want to see, can we simplify 35 100ths? Well, one way to do this would be to just realize, okay, it's a fraction, right? So it's a division problem. So I can do 35 divided by 100. Now this is going to give me a decimal, and it should give me 0.35, right? So let's go and put that in, and I have 0.35. But if I want it as a fraction, look what the calculator is going to do for us. It's not going to, whenever I tell this to turn it into a fraction, it's not going to give me 35 over 100. It's going to give me the simplified equivalency of that fraction. So let's go to math. And again, fraction's already highlighted, so we'll just hit enter. And it's saying take this answer of 0.35, turn it into a fraction. We'll hit enter there, and it turns out to be 7 over 20. So 7 over 20 is the equivalency. So we could put negative 5 and 7/20. This is because 35 divided by 5 equals 7, and 100 divided by 5 equals 20. So that's what's happening there in the simplification of 35/100ths to 7/20. Both the numerator and the denominator are being divided by the value of 5. Next question here, write negative 13 1/4 as a decimal. Well, remember, decimal would be right in between the integer and the fraction portion of the mixed number. Mixed number is an integer along with a fraction. Kind of mixed, right? That's why we call them mixed numbers. So let's go ahead and do our negative 13. And then we have the 1/4. And as we discussed in an earlier slide, that 1/4 simplifies to 0.25. So let's go ahead and put this 0.25. And that would be our final answer, negative 13.25. Next question, write 49 over 100 as a decimal. Well, in this case here, our denominator is already a multiple of 10, right? So we could go ahead and put our 0 point, and then we're looking for 100ths. So we stop at the 100ths place, 100ths, THS, and there are 49 of them. Well, there's just enough spaces there to put in that 49. So in the end, we're going to end up with 0.49. And once again, if you wanted to use a calculator on this, we could go ahead and do that. And to do so, we would put 49 divided by 100 and hit enter. And you can see here, it's going to give us 0.49. Next question. Write negative 0.91 as a fraction. So it is negative. So let's go ahead and do this. We're going to need a fraction bar, right? And the denominator, let's see what we have for a denominator here. Well, the 1 is in the 100th spot, right? The 100th spot, 100 THS. So 100 spots, so our denominator would be 100. And how many 100ths do we have? Well, we have 91 of them. So 91 over 100. Now this will not simplify. You could just, if you wanted to check and make sure, you could go ahead and get your calculator. And you could type in 91 divided by 100. And it's going to give us that 0.91 right there. Now, if you told it to turn it into a fraction, so let's hit that math button. Fraction's already highlighted. Hit enter. So it's saying take that answer, which is 0.91, turn it into a fraction. Hit enter, and we get 91 over 100. So if you want to be sure whether or not a fraction will simplify, you could always go ahead and use a calculator and use that method there. Next one, getting a little bit more challenging here. We have write 18 and 263/500ths as a decimal. Remember that the decimal is going to be right in between the integer and the fraction portion. So what's to the left of the decimal is the 18. So that's the easy part, right? 18. Put our decimal. Now our next question is turning this into a decimal, correct? Well, 500 is not, it is a multiple of 10, but it's not a 1 that's there. So let's consider a strategy. Let's do some work up here in this upper right hand corner. So if I have 263 over 500, and I'm already putting a 1 there because I'm getting ahead of myself. I want it to be, I'm really getting ahead of myself now, 500. There we go. Now if I wanted to get to something with a 1 with some zeros, well, it's got to be at least 500, right? And 100 is less than 500, so let's go to 1,000. Now, 500 times some number, right, which would be 2, would give us 1,000. So we're going to multiply the denominator by 2 as well. And 263 times 2 would be 400, 520, 526, I believe. 526. And I could go ahead and check that out here, right? See if it's going to be 526. I believe it should be. So let's get the calculator. So let's go ahead and check my mental math here. So let's do we want to get to a decimal, right? So we're going to do 263. We're going to divide that by 500 and hit enter. and that's going to give us 0.526, which is what I said earlier, right? So if we go ahead and put that in, and that's 526, double check that, yep, 526, so we have 526 1,000ths. So the 1,000ths place, right? Tens place, tenths place, hundredths place, 1,000ths place. So we know we have to go to here. So this last number 6 has got to land here. And we'll put the 5 and the 2 here. So 18.526 would be our final answer. On the next one, write negative 98 and 3/16 as a decimal number. All right, so we know the decimal is going to go here between the integer and the fraction portion. So let's go ahead and put our negative 98, get the integer portion out of the way, decimal, and now we need 3/16 as a decimal. That one might be kind of tricky because, well, it's not going to go into 100. It might go into 1,000. We'll go ahead and check. So let's do 3/16. We want to get to where we have a denominator of 1 with some zeros, because that's going to tell us the place value that we have to go to in our decimal. So first we go 16 to 10. Nope, can't get there. 16 will not go into 100. I know that already. It might go into 1,000. Let's go ahead and check that out. So let's go ahead and pull up the calculator here, and we'll clear that out. We're trying to get 16 into 1,000, so we'll check and see. 1,000, will it divide evenly by 16? And nope, we get a decimal number there. So let's try to go another place value. Let's throw another 0 here on the end. And now we're at 10,000. So let's check that out. Pull the calculator back up. And let's try 10,000. 10, 1, 2, 3 more decimals, or zeros, divided by 16. Will it divide evenly? Indeed it does. 625 is the number that it has to be multiplied by, right? We divided 10,000 by 16, and we got 625, I believe it was, right? That's what 16 has to be multiplied by to get there. So let's go ahead and multiply the 3 times 625, and whenever we do that, let's get that calculator back here, and 625 times 3. The beauty of a graphing calculator is the answer's already in there. I don't have to type out that 625 again. So I'll hit enter, and that's going to give me 1875. Okay, let's go ahead and go back. 1875, 1875. And now let's go ahead and try to turn this into a decimal. That would end up giving us 10,000ths place. Well, 4 zeros tells us the number of place values. So we need 1, 2, 3, 4 tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and indeed here we have the 10,000ths place. So we know this is where we need to end at. So we have 4 place values, and we have 4 digits in our numerator, so that's going to work out real well. 1875. So we'd end up with negative 98.1875. Now we could have used a calculator and done this a lot quicker just by dividing 3 by 16, realizing that the fraction here portion is a division problem. So let's go ahead and do 3 divided by 16 on the calculator, and whenever we do 3 divided by 16, and indeed we're going to get the decimal portion of our answer, 0.1875, and that's exactly what we got here, 0.1875. And our final problem here, now this might really start looking kind of tricky, right? So a lot of decimal numbers, but it's not going to be too big of a deal. Let's deal first with our integer part over here to the left of the decimal. This is going to be our integer of our mixed number. So let's go ahead and do the 257. And now we need a fraction portion of it. Well, let's look at number of place values we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to need 5 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is 100,000, correct? And so we have 5 zeros, 5 numbers, 2, 8, 1, 2, 5. Now, I know that this will simplify. You could put this answer in to IXL for this particular activity, and it would give you the correct, it would count it as correct. However, I know that both numbers end in a 5 or a 0, so they're at least divisible by 5. So I know that this number is going to simplify. Okay, so it's going to simplify to 257 and something. So let's go ahead and instead, let's take this value here. Let's put it in the calculator and let the calculator simplify it for us. So with the calculator here, let's go ahead and clear this out, get us a clear work field. Let's take this number here, just a decimal number. We're going to leave the portion here to the left. We're going to let that be. And every time I touch that, the calculator goes away. There we go. So what we want to do here is to go ahead and take the decimal portion, 0.28125. We want to take this number and we want to turn it into a fraction. So let's go to the math catalog here, the math list there, menu, that's the word I'm looking for, and let's enter in number 1, fraction. So we're telling it to take 0.28125, turn it into a fraction. Remember, it's going to simplify it for us, and it simplifies it down to 9/32. So let's go ahead and minimize that, 9/32. So we could find out what number that was each of the numerator and the denominator were being divided by. To simplify down to this by doing 28,125, just for the fun of it, let's go ahead and see what that number is. So we're going to do 28,125, 28,125, and we're going to divide that by 9, what the numerator simplified to. That's going to be 3,125. So 3,125 is what we had when we did 28,125 divided by 9. We got this result here. So that means that we multiplied, or divided, actually, we divided, there we go, divide. We divided the numerator by 3,125 and got 9. And if we did the same to the denominator, divide 100,000 by 3,125, then this would give us 32. So that's the value that the numerator and the denominator are both being divided by in order to simplify it down to 9/32. All right, so those are all of my examples for IXL.A1.A.4, convert between decimals and fractions. Good luck with your activity.